Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jake. Today with me is Ben. He's a journalist, and then today we'll actually discuss about, or we'll actually share about what journalist is in the United States. So, Ben, would you like to further introduce yourself?
Well, hi. I'm Ben Kitchings. I'm currently I currently run a podcast, but I've been a journalist in the past. I currently run a podcast. It is called the History Voyager. It is a deep dive into the Spanish flu and COVID-19, as well as I currently am doing interviews. Believe it or not, my podcast is, I believe, the 15th ranked podcast on the Spanish flu in any language. It is in the top 10% of podcasts in the world, apparently. So, hey, there's that. So I came on to talk about a lot of things in America.
Yep.
Okay, Jake, fire away.
All right. So, Ben, all right. First of all, so how do you actually get into journalism at the beginning?
Well, I worked on a small paper, and it was a small paper in a big city. And because of that, I ended up I covered the housing crisis in 2008. Well, it was before 2008 when I started covering it. It was around, let me think, 05, when I started covering it. And it wasn't called the housing crisis, so to say. It was just me covering the real estate bubble and the ins and outs, that kind of thing. Let's see. I also covered various transportation issues in my city, and so how do you get into journalism? You get into journalism because you know somebody, and what they never tell you about journalism is when you're a journalist, when you're writing. When you're writing stories in your town, you're going to encounter a lot of people on the worst day of their life. Because think about it. If your life is going fine, and you've got your woman and your wife is good, or your kids are good, or whatever, and your job's okay, you're not going to sit down next to a stranger in a bar and tell them about how your job is bad, or how because your job is bad, I'm going to tell this story about my job that I probably shouldn't tell about my job because I might get fired. But here you go. Here's a story about my job. Blah blah blah. Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not going to happen, but it does. Or the thing about a journalist is the thing I learned really quick is the people you need to talk to are often the people that nobody sees. Like the people that nobody really thinks about. People that you might pass in the hallway or because they see more than people realize. And also for them it's just it's not a little, it's important for them to have that job, but they can get another one of those jobs pretty easily. So to them, they don't necessarily have loyalty to the place as much. So they're more willing to talk about it. They're more willing to discuss what's going on, basically.
So do you mean that the people that you interview or the people that you met before their
I wouldn't say okay, wait. There's a difference between an interview and there's a difference between an interview and a source. Okay? There's a big difference between somebody you're sitting down and interview this person and you talk to them, and like a source where somebody says, well, I was in this meeting, and in this meeting this happened, right? But I can't tell you that. This never happened. This conversation never happened. Okay? You see what I'm saying? Like, like, or like you'd have, like somebody would tell you. I remember specifically there was like the governor of my state was going to widen a highway, and it was going to be so wide that he was going to tear out cities. He was going to literally widen it wider. He was literally going to eradicate whole big cities to widen this road. And he would have done it too. That's the thing. He would have done it too, except for the economy cratered. Like the economy crashed. And this was about maybe 12 years ago now, or what year is this? 21? 13 years ago. Gee, that's a long time. Gee, that doesn't feel it. It feels like that was yesterday, but really it was a long time ago. Yeah, okay. But, he was going to do that, and but things happened. And people even at the time didn't like it. People in his administration didn't like it. People in the government didn't like it, but he was going to do it. And personally, I don't know, but personally, I don't think he had good reasons for it. Like, I think he was being paid, or I think things were happening, or whatever. Because it doesn't make sense to displace that many people and that many jobs just so you can create a highway. I mean, that's one example.
So you are the source is the source. The people that give you the information is the one that they're usually underappreciated, and then they're usually because something happened.
Here's the difference. Okay, here's the difference. When I have a podcast, so like I'm a podcaster. So if I have a podcast and I'm talking to King Williams, let's just use him as an example. This is a man that runs 2 nonprofits in my state. He's very knowledgeable about getting African Americans, what you might think of as black people, getting them to the polls and getting them motivated to vote and things like that. And he's very well aware of the challenges to voting in my state. Okay, he's very knowledgeable about it. Now, if I'm gonna have him on a podcast and I'm gonna talk to him on the podcast, because he is who he is, he needs to be a sort. He needs to be like an interview, right? Now, if I was just gonna call him up or text him and ask him a question, that's different. That's different. That's not, because he's so recognizable. The minute he goes on that podcast, he has to be an interview. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, he has to be out with his name. He has to be out front.
All right.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like, do you see what I mean?
Because maybe what I understand is that because, for example, the person that you say Larry King, right? So because he is so famous, and then because he is the
he's not.
He can be the person.
He's respected.
Actually, he's respected by the people.
He carries the.
Yeah, he can.
He carries the
whole,
interview.
Whole thing, So he
exactly
he can be the valid source for you to actually prove to people that whatever you reported or whatever you do is actually you have a reference, right? Correct?
That's okay. We can go with that.
Yeah, and then you have
we can go with that.
Yeah, a valid reference or valid source.
But now, so like, he might not tell me things on the record that, and I don't know. So, but he might not say things on the record that would go against his reputation. or whatever, because he has a public reputation. He's a public figure, essentially. Okay, so if you want to talk to somebody, okay, example. When I'm talking about COVID, right? I'm talking about COVID-19. I want to talk to normal people. I want to talk to just regular folks about their regular lives and how COVID has affected their regular life. Okay, because if you're somebody, okay, like if you're okay, when I interviewed a guy who ran for the governor of the state of New York, and his interview was terrible. We argued on the interview. It was terrible. I didn't release it because I don't want to release that, right? Because that's going to hurt my brand. It's going to hurt because I don't want people to hear me argue with somebody. Okay, I don't want people to hear that. Especially like if we're debating something, that's one thing. But if he's arguing with me about whether or not COVID was real, that's something else. Okay? Now, the thing that I have to keep in mind is that I know more about this disease than a lot of people because I've studied it, right? I've read up on the sources. I've read things. I've read administrative things. I've read scientific things. So I see this disease from all sorts of angles that most people don't see, right? So what I have to keep in mind is, if you're somebody that you think something different about, because in my country, COVID-19 is a political situation. Even now, it's a political situation. Okay. So if you're somebody that you disagree with me about COVID, I have to bear in mind that you might not understand what I understand. Like, you might not
see where you come through, right?
Well, okay, let me give you an example. Without being too specific, because I don't want to alarm people. What if I told you that because of how my country's medical system is, it's entirely possible to die of COVID and to not be an official COVID death? And what if I told you, okay, and what if I told you that there's a lot more of those than you would think? Like, so there's a lot more of those than you would think.
You are saying that, there are people actually die from COVID itself, but then it's been reported that they die from other diseases or other causes, right?
What I'm saying is that, okay, it's entirely possible to die of COVID-19 and to not be marked down as a COVID death, whether that's accidental or not. And I'm saying that that's possible, that that's a lot more common than anybody thinks.
All right.
Okay.
But the thing is that, in the early stage of COVID, when we say that the US cases is rising up, like shooting up, and then I think the CDC or the government also come out and say that some of the cases actually, for example, the person might get into a car accident and then the person die, but then when they check the person, they actually check that the person actually got COVID and it recorded as a COVID death. And with that, they actually readjust the whole, or they refilter the whole system, which shows that the COVID death in America is actually not that much. So what I'm saying right now is that people might die, people might pass away because of COVID. However, at the same time, because of the system itself.
Let me give you an example. Let me give you a concrete example of what I'm talking I had a podcast guest in the early days of my podcast, and off air, it might have even been on air. It's been so long since I've listened to that episode, I don't even remember. He told me a story about his neighbors dying. And they died in one weekend. Like his neighbors in the house next door, they all died. Now, this was before we knew that COVID could cause heart attacks. Just before anybody knew that COVID could cause heart attacks. Now, they all died of a heart attack. Now, is it possible they died of a heart attack? Sure. But let's go back to the car crash. Okay. As a historian, because eventually this is going to get historical. Okay, eventually COVID is going to get historical. As a historian, it's useful to break out the deaths of any pandemic into two categories. Deaths that happened because of COVID. Deaths that happened directly from the disease, and deaths that happened because of the disease. So, for example, my buddy, my friend, his parents have a friend who died not of COVID, okay, but because of COVID. He died because the hospital was too overstressed for them to worry about him with his problem. Okay? So in a normal situation, in a normal, healthy, whatever situation, in a normal healthcare load, so to say, he probably would have been treated and he probably would have been fine. But because of COVID and because the doctors and nurses were overstressed, he died in a hospital room. And that's sad, but it's understandable. Now, historically, he didn't die from COVID. He died because of COVID. Okay? Okay? So that's one thing. Another thing is the trouble with new disease. Okay? The trouble with new diseases is they're new. Now, a virus, according to everything I've read, a virus changes generation every 2 weeks. Now, if you have a new disease, think of a new disease like a kid, like a child. Okay? So, 1 week, my little nephew wants to be a journalist. Okay. 2 weeks later, my little nephew wants to be an astronaut. 2 weeks later, my little nephew wants to be a paleontologist. 2 weeks later, firefighter, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, that virus doesn't know what it wants to be when it grows up yet. Right? One of the reasons in this country, in my country, in America, one of the reasons in America that you have so many people on the right, talking about the lab leak theory is because what the lab leak theory says is this virus is actually old. So an old virus, is something we don't need to be as concerned about as a new virus. Okay? You see what I'm saying? Okay. All right.
So now, you mean that it's old, which means it knows what it will be, or it already be what it will be, right? Like, for example,
the chances of an old virus mutating into something completely different are pretty slim.
Yeah, it's very slim.
Pretty slim.
But then you also see that there are some evolved COVID, You see, like the Africa evolved COVID, and then they're also from
Exactly.
UK,
India.
Yeah, India. Yeah.
You have India. Also, what you have going on in the American Midwest, in the Upper American Midwest, is a little bit crazy,
But I
a
think
little bit disturbing.
yeah,
But
but what you
yeah.
say, because it's already matured, so even though it evolved or it mutate, but then the source or the it won't be that different or that far, that the difference will not be that far, right?
So if it's an old virus, okay, if it's an old virus, the mutations won't be that far off.
Yep.
But with a new virus, the mutations are going to be a lot potentially could be a lot different.
Right. Okay. Yep.
Like for example, the flu,
Mm-hmm.
the regular flu, influenza,
Mm-hmm.
year to year is not that much different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Every year there's a new strain of it.
Mm-hmm.
Every year there's a new strain, but every year it's not that much different from the one before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and some years it actually repeats.
Mm-hmm.
Some years it's so similar it actually repeats, like not the year before, but like a previous year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, like there was a strain of flu called the Hong Kong flu.
Yep.
I forget what the. There was a strain of flu called it hit in 1960. It hit the U.S. in 1969.
Mm-hmm.
1968. It also hit the U.S. in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a deadly flu, for sure. It killed quite a few people. But it was essentially a known commodity. It was essentially people knew basically how it was going to go, like the infection wave it was going to take. But with COVID, like nobody, I mean, it's not that nobody knows, it's that it could change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? You see what I'm saying? Like it could change, it could mutate. And okay, like for example, so the way to get a virus is, okay, it's let me remember. The way to get a virus essentially is mammal plus is waterfowl, so waterbird plus mammal, or fish plus mammal, okay? And then you either eat the undercooked animal or you're exposed to the waste of the animal.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get the virus. Okay. Now, when you give a virus, if you were to give a virus to, say, a cat or a dog or a pig or whatever, and then that pig gave it back to another person, that virus would substantially change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that is a substantial change, and that is what people were afraid of with COVID, with any virus. That's what people really are afraid of, is that it'll come back out of that animal and be really different.
Right, but as you mentioned, it can be from animal, but then for this COVID, we all know that it's actually it's also from a lab, from Wuhan, So it's basically they actually try to do something. Maybe they are trying to get a cure for it, but then at the same time, because of some safety measure, it's not that good. So it got leaked to the public, you see, from the lab itself.
Okay, so here's what I think about that. I am an investigator. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I try to keep an open mind about literally everything. Mm-hmm. I personally have not seen evidence of the lab leak theory that accounts for, okay, I would believe I would be more inclined to believe the lab leak theory
Mm-hmm.
if somebody could account for how, how did the entire world's media miss that? How did the media of Earth miss that? How did because India and China hate each other,
Yeah.
right? India and China hate each other.
Mm-hmm.
So how did the Indian media miss the COVID, miss the lab leak, right? How did that happen, right? I mean, so Wuhan, China is right where viruses come from in the world,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
on Earth. It just so happens to be right where viruses come from anyway, on Earth. Most of your viruses have actually come from there.
Yep.
In the world. So right there, that's one issue. Another issue is, okay, I'll give you an example. Right now in my state, we have the Indian variant of COVID.
Okay.
Nobody knows how that happened. That shouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm.
It literally shouldn't have happened. Because we pretty much made it so that you can't fly to India, and you can do domestic flights, but I don't think you can do international flights.
Mm-hmm.
And Canada, you can't even. I mean, Canada is pretty much sealed up.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a question: how did the Indian variant of COVID get here? You know, could it have been that some Indian person flew themselves and they were sick with COVID? Maybe. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
but it happened. So what I'm saying is, when you think about viruses, okay, you have to account for the unknown. You have to account for the fact that there's going to be things that happen that you don't know how that happened. I'll give you a historical example.
Mm-hmm.
So Tehran, Iran. It was Persia. It was Persia when this happened. The Spanish flu hit Tehran really bad, really, really bad, and nobody knows why. It wasn't on any Western trade routes. Persia wasn't involved in World War One. Nobody knows why Tehran was one of the worst hit cities for the Spanish flu. I mean, nobody. How did it get there? I mean, you know, nobody knows.
Mm-hmm.
But there it is. So that's something that, you know, in the West, we look at we always look at we want everything to be neat and tidy, and there needs to be a reason, and there needs to be, you know, it's kind of think of it like a movie, right? Like, you're going to find out how the girl died. You're going to find out how the guy died.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a neat plot, blah, blah, blah. This is viruses, man. Not everybody knows. Like, I've got a 2-year-old down the street from me. Well, that 2-year-old is old. And that 2-year-old is older than my father. They're going to start understanding COVID. Okay?
So,
you know what I'm saying?
So for you, alright, you're basically saying that, you know, because of the lack of evidence that, you know, you can't really say that it's actually from the lab itself, and that it can actually, you know, come from anywhere because it's a virus, right? It's something that, you know, it's a species, I would say, you know, it's a small viruses or a small species. But then for you, where or how it all happens, like for you itself, because you are saying that it's not from the lab, right? And how do you think it start, the whole COVID thing?
How do I think it started?
Yeah.
I'll tell you how I think it started. I think somewhere in the world, probably in China, maybe not, the wrong mammal met the wrong bird, and that met the wrong person, and that's how I think it started.
Right. For you, it's more into like the animal itself, right? Oh, but then at the same
For
time,
me, I think it's
Mhm.
for me, I think it's an accident. I think it's a weird accident that just sort of happens, you know. And I think, by the way, I think we're going to get a lot more of these because I think we're much more connected now as a planet.
Mhm.
Like, and I think we're much more connected, and I think the Earth is warming. And as the Earth warms, you get microbes coming up out of the ground, and you get all kinds of things happening. So yeah, I think this is going to happen a lot more.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I mean, eventually they are saying actually every 5 years there will be one pandemic, or there will be one outbreak, like the SARS, the previous one is the previous big one is actually the SARS and also the Ebola. But then that is from SARS is from bird, and Ebola is basically because of the hygiene issue. They are eating the monkey. Yeah. So yeah, but then if it's from the animal itself, as we can see, the China government, they are also trying to control the media. They don't let people actually go into the lab and get evidence, and they actually limit. They kind of buy the media and saying that it's not from the lab, it's not from China. And I think recently some of the scientists from United States and also the United Nations, they're actually going to China to try to investigate the whole situation. But then as we all know, it's also kind of covered by the whole China government and also the Communist Party, the whole army. So if it's really from an animal, is there a need for the China communists actually do so much of work to just cover it up, or to just control them? So yeah, the reason why I believe it's from the lab is because if let's say it's from an animal, there are no need for the government to actually do so much thing to just stop people from investigating it. If it's from an animal, I think they will open up and they will just be like, it's from an animal, it's not from our country. But then because of their action, what they do and how they respond to it, it kind of it shows me that they are not comfortable, they are not confident that it's not from the lab, and then they are trying to hide something from the public itself.
Well, okay, let's talk about something else. As an example, I don't know how old you are, but I'm old enough to remember Chernobyl. Now, Chernobyl happened in another communist country. It didn't happen in China, but it happened in another communist country.
Yeah, during the Russia, the Soviet Union.
Yeah, happened in the Soviet Union. The thing about Chernobyl, and I saw the miniseries recently, and it brought back so many memories. But the thing about Chernobyl was an accident.
Yep.
Chernobyl was an accident. The Russian government decided, the Soviet Union government, took forever to acknowledge that it had happened, simply because it would make communism look bad. Because communism can't look bad. And
yeah, but the thing is that Chernobyl is, if we go back to the history, is it's an accident, but then it's also more to how the government or the Soviet actually cut down on the funding to actually build the whole structure, and also of the ego
Right.
of the operator itself himself. So yeah, so it might.
I mean, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not one of these people that thinks the lab leak theory isn't possible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm certainly not. But I am one of these people that I want you to show me the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to show me evidence of anything. Like, if you want to tell me that Bigfoot is real,
Mm-hmm.
show me evidence of Bigfoot,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to tell me that the Loch Ness Monster is real, fine, okay. Show me the evidence of show me.
Mm-hmm.
Show me what you have. I can tell you as a journalist, and as somebody who knows other journalists, and as somebody who lived through some remarkable things in my life. It's almost impossible to keep a secret. It's almost impossible.
Yep.
Okay.
But then, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about,
but then like
when
you said, it's impossible to actually keep a secret. But then now we are not dealing with corporates or an individual. We are basically dealing with the whole nation or the whole party, which is it might be the number 1 or number 2 strongest nation in the world, other than in the United States. So it is. I mean, if they would like to cover it, I think there are no problem, covering the whole thing. You see.
okay, look at the Uyghur concentration camps.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I live in America.
Mm-hmm.
I read American newspapers. I read the Times of India on occasion. I watch YouTube. I have friends. From. I don't have any Chinese friends at present. I don't believe. I don't even know that I have any Asian friends at present. Although I have a friend that lives in Indonesia. I know about what China's doing with the Uyghur Muslims.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure China would rather that I not know that.
Yep.
Okay, I'm sure that would go on. I know about China. I know about China and Chinese spyware on Chinese phones.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know an awful lot about. Yeah, the Huawei one, the OnePlus.
Mm-hmm.
I know an awful lot about that.
Mm-hmm.
I know an awful lot about Chinese spyware and Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
How do I know that? I know that because it was reported by news outlets around the world.
Mm-hmm.
If China can't keep that straight, do you see what I'm saying? If they can't keep that straight, I'm not sure they could keep a lab leak straight. I'm really not sure they could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm absolutely not saying that they couldn't shoot people. They couldn't shoot all the people and cover it up and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying that, I'm not one of these people that I'm 1,000%. There's no way in the world this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to see
solid evidence.
I want to see evidence, and I don't. Okay, I might even believe that they would do it. Like I might even believe that they would do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just as a way to perfect a chemical warfare agent or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, let me ask you this: the previous president of the United States
Mm-hmm.
and the previous party in power in the United States loves to go to war.
Yep.
Loves to go to war. I don't think they would have missed out on that chance.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't. I honestly don't. And I also think that the American intelligence agency is really good. I mean, look, the American intelligence service, the CIA and the NSA, they actually went around to different places in the world and leaked about their own president to the rest of the world. Okay, leaked about how Donald Trump was either in cahoots with Russia or somebody in his campaign was, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
to the rest of the world. I really think that if the NSA or the CIA or whoever else had evidence and they said, hey, China is making a virus.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, here it is. Here's the proof. Or here's, maybe not proof, but here's why we think that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like China, I mean, okay. The CIA has things in televisions. They have things in phones. They have,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
the CIA probably is listening to this conversation.
Yeah, the FBI.
Probably because of you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know I'm on a podcast in Singapore, and the CIA, I know for a fact that the Chinese government and the Singaporean government both listen to that podcast from the other end.
Yeah, they have the ability. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, for America, like what you said, for America, because of the whole 10/11 thing, I mean, you guys is kind of like perfect the whole, the whole spying process, the whole, security thing. Yeah, you guys is kind of like perfect the whole system of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for you, because you always say that, America is all about freedom, it's all about democracy. But then the thing is that when people, come in and start spying on you and then start, listening to, for example, your conversation, no matter with with your wife, with your child, or with your boss, or with even with the people from another side of the world. So do you think that, it's actually, something that, is still something that democracy is still something that you believe in, or yeah, because we know that, last few years, Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg actually get, he need to go to a court, basically to just explain to the whole, court, saying that, what is Facebook and how they actually, use the personal data, use the information, this and that. So how do you see the whole, the whole situation right now in US? Because it's kind of weird. US is always say that, we believe in democracy. We believe in, people having their own choice. They have their own rights. They have their rights to protect their personal information, their data. They have the rights to actually, say whatever they want. But then at the same time, the government is kind of also like controlling or spying in everyone. So what's your, how do you see it?
I personally believe in democracy.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in democracy more than I ever used to.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know really who the average American is. But I think the average American is somebody that's too much in a hurry to I think the average American takes a lot for granted in their government.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also the big worry that I have isn't too much the loss of democracy. It's there's a brain drain going on in my country. People are going from the rural, from the rural to the urban areas. And I really worry about that because I don't know if those people are going to be. I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. I went to a funeral last weekend in the country, in a rural area, and all the adults, all the people my parents' age, they were all educated. They were all very well educated. And they believed the virus was real. They thought it was dangerous. They thought it was lots of things, blah, blah, blah. I don't know that they would have thought about the lab leak theory or whatever, but they would have thought it was real and we needed to care about it. People my age and younger than me, most of them didn't think it was real. Most of them thought it was a hoax, I would say. Yeah.
But then why do you think they believe it's not real? Like I mean, there are people that say it's fake, it's something that the government actually come up with. But then what is we can see the evidence, people actually get COVID and then they
okay, why do
yeah.
Why do they think it's why do they think it's fake?
How to justify it, basically?
They think it's fake because they don't want to think about it. Mm-hmm. Or they think it's fake because they don't trust experts. Mm-hmm. Or they think it's fake because their tribe thinks it's fake. Like their quote tribe, their peer group, their friends think it's fake, and so therefore they have to think it's fake. I mean, politics in this country is a team sport. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's a I don't know how politics. Well, no, it's a tribal. I want to see if I can explain this correctly. I want to see if I can explain this seriously. Okay. All right. So imagine you have a tribe. And this tribe is hundreds of years old. Mm-hmm. And you have to think a certain way. You all have to think a certain way to be in the tribe. Or at least you have to say that you think that way to be in the tribe. Mm-hmm. And you want to be in the tribe because that's your friends, that's your family, that's your business associates, that's everything. That tribe is everything.
Yeah, your group with the same mindset.
It's not just your group. It's every group that you would ever meet. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of people, that's about as deep as they get with politics. Mm-hmm. That I have to vote this way because my tribe votes this way. Mm-hmm. Right? There's a whole lot of people in my country. That whatever else they are, like however smart they are, or stupid they are, or educated they are, or whatever, what they are is they're part of a tribe. Mm-hmm. And they got to do what the tribe says. And it's not formal. That's the other thing. It's not really a tribe. But it's their, like you said, it's their group. But it's also every group that they'd ever want to be around. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not like, okay, imagine that you made a new country out of nothing. Mm-hmm. Imagine that your ancestors made a new country out of nothing. And you're very proud of that. And you should be. You should be very, very proud of that. but you also don't want to change, right? You don't want to change, and okay.
That's
for example,
tradition kick in, right? You don't want to change.
Well, exactly, and that to me, like, if you want to if you want to talk about it really from a philosophical standpoint, to me, like, a large part of the reason that this COVID thing isn't, like, a lot of people don't think it's real, boils down to the fact that it's new.
Yep.
Boils down to the fact that it's new.
And as what you mentioned, in US the situation is that people don't want to change, and then there are two group of people. One is that they believe it, and then they accept the vaccine. They do whatever the government, or they trust what the CDC told them. And then the other group is basically they're saying that it's a fake, and they don't want the vaccine, they don't trust the government. But then then let's look back into the Trump situation, the whole like what you say, the CIA, they're actually leaking the information of Donald Trump, and then recently the election in US, and then Donald Trump kind of asked his small MAGA troop to attack the what do you call that, the court, I forget the name. Yeah, but then the whole MAGA thing, the whole two side, left and right. So how do you see that, right now?
How do I see MAGA, or how do I see? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me think about how to say this right. I live in one of the fastest growing places on my continent. My city has grown from 1 million people to 7 million people in my mother's lifetime. My mother is 70 years old. I have Latin friends. I have black friends. I have friends. I have gay friends. But a lot of people don't. Not a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people in my city do, but a lot of people in the country don't. A lot of people. So, like, if you're somebody that you're from a rural city, if you're somebody who's white and you're from a rural place, and all you ever see are people who look like you and think like you, and you don't ever, for example, see somebody who had to escape Cuba, or had to, let me think of another, like, you don't see people with varied experiences, right, or whatever. You might think that you're the only type of American that matters, right? Now, add to that there's not enough jobs to go around. There's just not enough jobs to go around. Not even for educated people are there enough jobs to go around. That's the truth. And for years in my country, for years and years, and it only recently stopped, the HR departments, the human resources departments, the places that were the departments and businesses that were hiring, that were in charge of hiring, would basically play games with their requirements. I could totally see it, honestly. I could completely see how somebody could take all that together and just get really, really mad and vote for this man that says that he's going to bring factories back, that said that he was going to open up the coal mines again. Because, okay, all of my political life up until 2010, literally, I remember being a child and hearing like, oh, well, you'll never have what we call Obamacare or the ACA or whatever. We'll never be able to have that in this country. Well, here's the president, not Trump, but Obama, who essentially performed a miracle and got healthcare,
taking care of.
To change the healthcare system.
No.
And people had been saying for decades that wasn't going to happen. So if somebody comes along and says, oh yeah, we're going to bring factories back and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, I could honestly, I could totally see how somebody could believe that.
Yep.
Now, also, we need to talk about the fact that there was a lot of very ugly things that happened because he gave the basically bigots courage, pretty much. I mean, I get it. I get that people like that tend to gravitate towards somebody like him.
Yeah. And then I think he is also a leader. For me, Donald Trump is a real leader. He have the quality. He go bankrupt and then he actually rebuild everything by himself. So he have the influence. He have the power. He have the personality. But at the same time, I will also say that we can see that Donald Trump, he able to actually achieve what he mentioned, or like what you say, he able to understand what the people in America they are facing, and then he able to target it by saying that he will be bringing factories back to America and made in America. That's the whole the whole campaign, the whole thing. Yeah. So they will. There are some quality of Donald Trump. For me, he is not the worst. He is one of the most impactful leader in US, I would say. But at the same time,
I'll let you finish. But I wouldn't say that because he wanted to end Obamacare and he couldn't do that.
Yep.
He wanted to, let's see, what else did he want to do? He wanted to end deferred action for childhood arrivals. And he couldn't do that. He wanted to ban certain countries based on religion. And I think he eventually made it a little harder. Maybe a lot harder, but he didn't do nearly what he said he did.
Yeah, he can't do everything because of you can't do everything that you promise. Like in every government that I can see, or even in our country, the government can promise us 100 things, but at the end of the 4 year, they might only do like 10% of what they promised because of the situation, and because they basically don't have a plan to actually target what they want to do, right? So but then there are also some things that actually Donald Trump trying to bring in or do. He able to achieve. For example, I think during his time, the military, the veterans really get taken care of, like those who really need help those who get post-war.
That he did do, yeah.
Yeah, he did that, and then at the same time, I think the economy and the whole economy of the United States is actually boosting after he become the president, because of his knowledge and his power. You see how he actually play with the politics, and he actually bring businesses. He actually boost the economy. So there are some good quality of him. But then, as we can see, because of the unpopular of his his behavior, his personality, we can see that a lot of news agencies in the US, like CNN, or they actually they are actually like biased news. They try to pro Biden for this election, and during the whole time Donald Trump being the president, they try. A lot of time they are giving people a bad impression of Donald Trump. So what do you as a journalist, how do you see the biased journalists and
here's what I really think about the state of American journalism as a whole. Okay. Before Donald Trump was president, I'll give you an example. Before Donald Trump was president, you could go, I wrote papers on things around Donald Trump, never knowing that he was going to be president. I could go to the library and read books about how Donald Trump was a drug addict, and read books about how different bad behaviors and different bad things about Donald Trump that were in the library, that were just in books in the library. He used to be interviewed by Rolling Stone. And in his own words, he would say things. He would say things like, I forget all what he would say, but it was bad stuff. Also, for years, for the entire time, he was president, and then years before that, there was a lot of, it had been known in circles for years that Donald Trump was actually laundering money for the Russian mafia. That had been talked about for years. The media never reported that. They never reported that. They never reported the fact that you could go. Here's the thing. Donald Trump was paid. Okay. Donald Trump built a casino in New Jersey. The casino in New Jersey caused a lot of problems for a city in New Jersey. A lot of problems. The casino was actually bankrupting the town that the casino was in because it was causing so many problems. The town in New Jersey had to go to the state of New Jersey and beg the state of New Jersey to change the law so that they could basically pay Donald Trump to go away. They could basically pay Donald Trump to take his casino, to basically leave, please leave your casino and we'll just blow up the building and go, just please go away. Donald Trump, you said earlier, Donald Trump is a good businessman. Actually, he's actually not a good businessman. He's actually a terrible businessman. I'll give you just a couple examples right off the top. Donald Trump could not sell vodka. Okay. If you can't sell vodka in America, you're a terrible businessman. Literally every adult in this country, just about it, has a bottle of vodka in their house. Somewhere. Okay, Donald Trump couldn't sell steak. Okay, couldn't sell steak up until very recently. The average American ate steak, ate beef, literally once a day. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
up until very recently. And the only reason they stopped is because it became apparent to basically everybody that beef causes heart attacks. If you eat beef once a day, if you eat beef once a day for your entire life, you're gonna die of a heart attack. It's going to happen. I'm sorry. Okay? And if Donald Trump can't sell steak and he can't sell vodka, he's not a good businessman. Now, the media did not report this. And people talk about how the media had an anti-Trump bias. I don't think they did, honestly. I think the bias they had is that, they didn't want to scare people.
Mm-hmm.
Because some of the stuff was scary. Some of the stuff was really, really, really scary. Like, let me give you an example. Okay, let me think about how to say it.
Mm-hmm.
So when January 6th happened,
Mm-hmm.
okay, one thing I will never forget about January 6th is there were several hours where nothing happened, where it was not obvious that anything was going to be stopped. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It was also once it became apparent that it wasn't going to be stopped, it was like Donald Trump approves of this.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you find out that actually he egged it on,
Mm-hmm.
okay, he actually initiated it by telling people to go do it.
Yep.
When you asked me earlier, do I believe in democracy? The main tenet of democracy is that you have an election and then you abide by the election results.
Mm-hmm.
When you have an entire party that even now, still today, a majority of the members of that party and virtually all of the elected representatives of that party will publicly say they don't believe the election was real.
Sure.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Was official or real or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is legitimately terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There was the whole thing to me is just, it's sad. The entire thing to me is just, it's sad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's sad that we can't have an honest debate about real problems in this country that are real. Because America has problems.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That are very real that we're not having discussions about.
Yep.
Because you can't get one party to even get off the, yeah.
But when you see, back, the current president Biden, he's how many years old? He's old, right? And then their evidence show that he is not that out of so many candidates, he might not be the one that actually the best choice, but then because of what Donald Trump do, and then the how people actually see him, a lot of people say American kind of choose just vote for Biden because he is the only choice. So how do you see the whole situation, especially as a ex-journalist yourself?
Let me tell you about America.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you about American politics. If I'm anything, I'm a political theorist. If I'm anything other than a podcaster, I'm a political theorist. There's a quirk in American politics that has always baffled me. I don't know if that's a word you understand. It's always confused me or whatever. There's a group of people in this country that are very conservative.
Mm-hmm.
They're very religious. They're very pro-family. They're very family-oriented. And if I wasn't an American, if I didn't understand America, I would look at this group and I would think this group has to be Republican. Because look at the Republican Party. They're pro-family. They're pro-business. They're pro-family. They're pro-business. They're pro. Lord knows they're pro-religion. So, why in the world isn't this group Republican? Why do they always turn out for the Democratic Party? I know why, because I'm an American. I've studied American history, and I get it. But I'm talking, of course, about the African Americans. African Americans, or as we call them, black people, were never going to vote for Bernie Sanders. That wasn't going to happen. Okay? They were never going to vote for Pete Buttigieg. They were never going to vote for Elizabeth Warren. They might have voted for Kamala Harris. That might have happened. But they weren't going to go to the left. They weren't going to go to the American. That wasn't going to take place. So of those choices, you had to go to Biden.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that you need to understand is a whole lot of Americans, even Americans that had been Republican their entire life, thought that Trump was terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Not a bad president, but absolutely terrifying. Okay? Terrifying. They had to get him out. And January 6th proved it. Mm-hmm. That the only reason that he left was not because he lost the election. It was because literally the vice president and the Speaker of the House and the head of the Senate, the majority leader of the Senate, they were almost killed. They came within hours of being killed. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm talking about. That's the only reason he left office. Just because they called the military in, and the military protected them from a mob.
But for another person that is very important throughout all this year in American politics is that the Bernie. Yeah, he throughout his whole career, he tried to he run for president, but then I don't think he ever won. He never be the American president. So but at the same time, a lot of people call him a communist. So how like for you personally, how do you actually see him? Is there a chance? But because I mean, he got some good ideas, you know.
I don't know if I don't know if Bernie Sanders could win.
Mm-hmm.
I also know full well that if he did win, none of his policies would be implemented.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly zero of his policies would be implemented.
Mm-hmm.
Because Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat. So the Democratic Party would not
buy it.
Exactly, they would not buy in.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I didn't vote for Bernie Sanders, because I knew he wasn't a Democrat, and I know how the government works. I mean, I know how the American government is supposed to work, and I know there's no way he's going to get his policies through. It's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. I mean, alright. So throughout the whole, now since we talk about the BLM, throughout the whole BLM, the Black Lives Matters, after the black guy got killed by 3 police, so
yeah,
the whole demography of US is kind of turn around. Black people, they all this year, they are the main element, or they are the main people that actually built America, other than the white American themselves. So during that time, when they start protesting, when they start to have all this rally, so how do you see the situation, American right now, especially after the BLM and then the COVID started? Kind of like right away. Yeah,
I think we're a divided society.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. It's interesting that we're having this conversation today, because today is the first. So June 19th was the day. June 19th. I don't know the exact year right off, but it was the day that blacks basically were freed from slavery. So the black people, they call that Juneteenth. So that's today is the first time that's actually a federal holiday. Now, in my state, apparently, it's not a recognized federal holiday.
Okay.
Which is funny. So in America, we have federalism, which means that I live in 2 places at once. I live in the state of Georgia and the country of the U.S. So I'm essentially under 2 different laws, 2 different sets of laws, and I pay 2 different sets of taxes and like that. Okay, so it's the state and the federal, right?
Yeah.
So the state of Georgia doesn't recognize this federal holiday, but the federal government does. So that's okay. So when we talk about how divided our country is, that's how divided our country is.
Then shouldn't the state follow the federal? Because the federal is like, in a company, the federal is like the CEO, okay? But then the state is just like, one of the manager or manager.
You're right. You're right, but that doesn't happen in my country. You're right. It should, but that doesn't happen. Increasingly, the Supreme Court, over the last number of decades, really, has said that essentially the 50 states are actually 50 different, basically sovereign entities after a fashion. I mean, well, that's not entirely true. I mean, we have the Food and Drug Administration, we have the highways, we have, the highways have to match up, the railroads have to match up. So that's all, whatever. But in terms of like, different states have different standards for silly things. Like, how to declare somebody dead. So we talked about COVID, right? So different states have different standards about how to declare somebody dead. Okay. So what's another one? Different states. So different states have different requirements to vote.
Requirement. So
to vote.
Does it mean that the age group or do they?
No, not the age. That's federal law. That's federal law, and they have to abide by that. But like in Georgia, to vote, you have to have an ID. You have to have a picture ID. And that's not entirely true in some states.
But what's about the picture ID? Because I mean the last election, there are also people that, the ID is a big part, or is a big stories that actually people talk about. So what's the different type of ID that US have? What's the different?
Okay. Okay. So to get an ID, and I wouldn't have done that had I not had on the guy I talked about earlier, whose name was King Williams. To get an ID in this country, you have to have a birth certificate. It's almost impossible to get an ID without a birth certificate in this country. If you don't, so there used to be, and there still are some, but there used to be a lot of black people that were not born in a hospital, so therefore they could not easily get a birth certificate.
All right.
So remember, there's an entire party that wants to keep people from voting. Okay, there's an entire party. I'll give you a silly example. In my city, for what year is this? 2021. In my city, for about 30 years, a little over 30 years now. Jesus. In my city, for a little over 30 years, the Republican Party has basically tried to say that not as many people live in Atlanta as people think. And every time they've tried to do that, they've succeeded. Now, the reason that is because that's tied to congressional representation. And the Republican Party tends to believe that those people are going to vote Democratic. Okay, so it's a bunch of games. It's games they play. They closed polls. They closed polling places in heavily black areas. They make it a lot harder for black people to register to vote than white people, just in general. When I registered to vote, I don't want to do that. When I registered to vote, all I had to do was show somebody a Netflix envelope, like an envelope. You know what Netflix is?
Yeah.
Okay, they have DVDs. I still get the DVDs, but all I had to do was show a Netflix envelope with my address on it. Apparently, other people have to show a lot more than that.
All right, but then
apparently,
I mean, all right. Go back to what you say. A lot of black people they are giving birth at home, for example. But then
Okay.
isn't them? I mean, I think they should also get a birth certificate and be recognized as an American, right? Because I mean, the place that you give birth is not that important, right? Because
I agree with you.
yeah. I mean, for example, if let's say you're driving your wife, your wife is pregnant, you're driving your wife to the hospital, and halfway, she needs to give birth, then the baby should be recognized, right? Then the baby should get a birth certificate, right? But then if follow what you mentioned, the people that actually not born in hospital, they won't get any birth certificate. Am I right? And if that's the case,
That's
right? Yeah, if
they have to go back and get it. They have to go back and get it later. In some cases, they don't get it, or they can't get it, or whatever. I'm not really the person to talk to about that.
Yeah.
I can certainly point you in the direction of somebody who is. I can certainly give you.
Yeah, is there a reason why they don't want to get the birth certificate? Because it is important not just for your identity. It's also important, for example, for your education, healthcare, and all this.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Not a good reason. It's not a good reason.
Yeah.
So not good reasons. No.
It's weird. All right. So yeah. So I think we cover the politics. We talk about the COVID. So is there other things that you would like to share? Not just in America, also in your professional life before we end this podcast.
Well, I'd like to talk about my podcast.
Sure.
Like I said up top in the beginning of the show, I do the History of Voyager. You can find it on any podcatcher. It's in the top 10% of podcasts in the world, apparently, which is amazing. Well, let's see. I did a deep dive into COVID-19, and I did a deep dive into the Spanish flu. And right now, I'm interviewing people, but I will eventually get back to a history deep dive. I'm pretty sure. But I just have so much fun talking to people that I just want to talk to people.
Yeah. But how it all started? I mean, the whole team.
How did it start?
Yeah.
Okay. I went to the doctor, and this was November of 19. I went to the doctor, and the nurse was really she was concerned. She was worried about COVID. Right? She was really worried about it. Now, I'd never heard of this thing. This is 2019. I didn't know anything about COVID. Right? And I didn't care. I mean, I was the typical American. I'm invincible. Whatever. Who cares? Yeah, it's not coming. Okay. Well, she was worried about it. And I wanted to do a podcast. I've been wanting to do a podcast for a while, but I didn't know what to do it on. And I thought, I can do it on the Spanish flu. Right? And, I knew what the Spanish flu was, or I thought I knew what the Spanish flu was. I mean, and we didn't even talk about that. We could have talked about that. But I thought I knew what the Spanish flu was, but I didn't. But while I was researching the Spanish flu, the president, Trump, said something. I was walking through the room and he said something, and I was like, oh my God, I can't even believe he said that. Like he said that only Democrats got got COVID. He said only Democrats got COVID. Don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. And I thought, oh my God, that's something exactly like Woodrow Wilson would have said. It's exactly what Woodrow Wilson would have said. Oh my God, that's crazy. Wow. So I started researching COVID and I started talking about COVID. And I started interviewing business owners about COVID. And it just grew from there. I had people email me to tell me that I was saving their lives. I'm used in college classes all over the world. It's amazing.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
People, like what you mentioned, you talk to people from different businesses. In America, I'm not sure. Is there an official lockdown, like the whole country? I think no, right? People can still.
Yes and no.
Yes and no, right? It's like a state thing, right?
It's a state thing.
Yeah.
And some states didn't have a lockdown at all.
Yeah.
California just got out of their lockdown.
Yeah. I think Texas they don't have any lockdown, and then they don't restriction.
Texas did for a while, for a little while they did, and then they stopped it.
Yeah. And wearing mask is not complimentary, right? In Texas, or there are few states.
Yeah, no, they don't. Yeah.
But then,
right.
do you think that lockdown is a need for the whole COVID? Because like my country, we are currently the whole nationwide lockdown, and businesses is suffering. People are complaining. So what's your, yeah?
Okay, and you can go. Okay, what I think about that, I have evolved. My thinking has greatly evolved. My first thought, that you can go on my podcast and hear it. My first thinking was the government was going to ride to the rescue. The government was going to pay these people to stay right where they were, and they should stay right where they were, and all this. I don't. Well, okay. Even if what I said earlier was true, like even if for every one person who died of COVID, you had 10 more who died of COVID but weren't reported. Even if that's true, and I don't know if that's true or not, but I've certainly read that. I still don't think that the lockdowns could really happen. Mainly because, like, if all the businesses die, how are you going to reboot everything?
Yeah, that's the thing.
That's it, isn't it?
Yep.
Like, I mean, also, like, at some point, and I don't know when this is, I really don't, but at some point, you just have to put on a mask and keep going.
Yep.
I mean, I got a vaccine.
Yep. Yeah, I asked this question because it's like in our country, the highest case goes to 8,000, if not mistaken. Yeah. But then, what the government did is basically total lockdown the whole country, which means you can't go dine in. The restaurants still open, the essential service still open, but then you can't go to shopping. You can't. Basically, the whole economy, is crumbled, is stopped. Only the basic needs is available, and a lot of businesses, like for example, like gyms, like cinemas, those entertainment and industry, they are basically dying right now. So a lot of people saying that it's time to cut out all this lockdown. We probably can just wear a mask, just reset, eventually save the industry so that people won't suffer that much, because people are afraid of the COVID, but then at the same time they don't have money right now. Their livelihood is affected a lot. Yeah.
What I would say, honestly, what I really would say today is like put on a serious mask, like a very serious mask.
Mm-hmm.
Put on a very serious mask. From everything that I've seen, I don't think getting around and sweating around COVID is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can get COVID from bodily fluids,
Mm-hmm.
from sweat and bodily fluids. Now, let's say the contagion rate is what they say it is. Okay, let's say the contagion rate is what they say it is. I honestly think if you're wearing a mask and you're being careful, you're wearing a mask, I think you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're vaccinated and you're wearing a mask, you should really be okay. You should really be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, that Indian variant seems pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But now here's the thing. I don't know if the Indian variant, is the Indian variant the variant, or is the Indian government telling the truth? Like, you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if the Indian government is telling the truth about their casualty rate.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's something about America's casualty rate that if this is real, this needs to be studied. I don't think it's real. Let me just say that right now. I don't think what I'm about to tell you is real. I know it's factual.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently, Florida and California have the same per capita COVID cases and COVID deaths. Now, I don't think that's real.
Mm-hmm.
Because Florida and California Florida had no restrictions, California has a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't think that's real. I think something is wrong.
And
something is not.
Yeah, and
correct.
From what I learned from what I heard is that in India, basically, the number is also quite under report. It's actually 3 or 4 times more than what they are having right now, because of the government basically they don't take care of the poor. That's why they don't report all the cases, or they can't take care of all the cases. So yeah, that's the reality of what we are living.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So we're gonna end the podcast here. So thank you, Ben, for joining for this podcast, and I'm looking forward to talk to you in the near future. Thank you.